Now's the time to learn more about what Jack Smith, the special counsel, just did in the Mar-a-Lago and D.C. election interference case, why it matters, what Judge Chutkan wrote in her order, and what comes next with Jack Smith's issuance through the Attorney General of two major reports outlining Donald Trump and why it all matters. Here I am in a Popok Live giving you the breakdown. We told you this was going to happen, so it shouldn't have come as a shock if you're a regular follower of Midas Touch or Legal AF. We told you that Jack Smith was in the process of making the decision to dismiss both the Mar-a-Lago case, which is the espionage obstruction of justice case, and the election interference case. So it was just a matter of time before he got around to filing it. We thought it would be sometime before December, early December, the week before Thanksgiving. Made perfect sense. He certainly was going to go now rather than wait to be fired by Donald Trump, who's threatened to not only fire Jack Smith, but also to go after and persecute, not prosecute, persecute everybody on his team, everybody in the Department of Justice who worked on the cases against Donald Trump, everybody in the FBI, the whole kit and caboodle. And so Jack Smith dismissed, but he also did two things, which I think were very, very smart in dismissing. And he filed his motion for leave to dismiss the indictment without prejudice. Let me unpack all that procedurally as a lawyer here who practices in these kind of cases. In order to dismiss an indictment, you can't just do it on your own unilaterally if you're the prosecutor. You've got to get court permission, especially if you're going to do it without prejudice. Without prejudice means that it can be refiled in the future. And why you have to get the court's permission is that the court protects defendants, not named Donald Trump, from being abused or harassed by prosecutors who are just constantly indicting and dismissing, and putting a complete shadow and public criticism against the person for no good reason. So you got to go to the judge and you got to ask nicely and show the grounds. And the grounds for it were simple. It's listed in Jack Smith's motion. It's that the Office of Legal Counsel, the OLC, which is effectively the internal in-house Supreme Court for the Department of Justice, whatever the OLC says, that's what the Department of Justice does. And they asked them the question, because it's one that, it's not easy to come up with. The question that the Jack Smith team asked is, when you're prosecuting a former president who committed crimes while he was president the first time, who gets elected again to be president before you've had the opportunity to actually try the case against him, but you've already indicted him, does the Constitution and the law around Article 2, which is the presidential powers law, require a dismissal of the case because it's impairing or impeding the office of the presidency? Yes or no? Sort of like asking AI or ChatGPT or a magic 8-ball. And the Office of Legal Counsel came back and said under their analysis that they could not, because Donald Trump got elected again, and there wasn't enough time to get the trial done before he actually stepped into office, they had to dismiss the case. Not because it didn't have merit, not because the evidence didn't support it, but because it would impair and impede the powers of the presidency, regardless of who's occupying it. They care about the institution of the presidency, even though we're all sort of rolling our eyes and scrunching up our nose over it and holding our nose over it because it's Donald Trump. And he created this scenario in collaboration, unfortunately, with Merrick Garland, who waited 19 months to start the investigation that led to the prosecution and indictment of Donald Trump. We'll leave that for a little bit later in the live broadcast. But because it will, having the shadow of a criminal indictment, prosecution and all that, undermines the power and authority of the President of the United States to do his job, both foreign and domestically. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't care that he's a convicted felon when he's negotiating with his adversaries abroad, like Putin and North Korea's chairman or any of them. But most people wouldn't want that to be part of their portfolio of work. And so we give them what's called temporary immunity. It's a temporary condition, and it evaporates as soon as the term is over. And for Donald Trump, we know when the term is over. He may not recognize it, but the rest of us do. It's going to be in 2029. And so at the end of 2029, then whatever was happening then, we can restart. So that's the reason. So the judge says, I understand why you're doing it without prejudice, because a future prosecutor, maybe in the hands of a future Department of Justice. You don't want to tie his hands and dismiss outright, which is what Donald Trump's been calling for in New York, what he's calling for everywhere, complete dismissal with prejudice, meaning never to be revived. And the judge says, yeah, I see why you're doing it without prejudice, because the OLC's guidelines were that it's a temporary immunity. Remember that word, that concept of temporary immunity? Because I'm going to talk more about it next week on another live edition when we talk about the New York case and sentencing. Same concept, temporary nature of the reason you can't currently prosecute, try, and or sentence Donald Trump, which evaporates and ends in 2029. Now, a lot of the Trump world after the dismissal, let me mention one thing in the dismissal I thought was very, very interesting. Two things. One, by Judge Chutkan to help out the special counsel and protect him a bit from future prosecution or persecution by Donald Trump's Department of Justice, and the other from Jack Smith's team themselves. Let's start with Jack Smith's team. They said the reason we're dismissing is not because, and here's the implication, not because we're afraid of Donald Trump, not because we have doubts about the quality of our evidence or the weight of our evidence against you, the decision to make to begin the investigation or prosecution, the indictment that we obtained, none of that. We stand behind all of our decisions and the strength of our case. I love the fact that Molly Gaston, writing on behalf of Jack Smith, said basically, F you, middle finger, for those that are listening, to Donald Trump. We're not scared of you. I know you want us to obey and to bow because of fear and the interim effect of threatening to go after us, but we stand behind our work. The decision to indict you, the indictment, the quality and the weight of the evidence that we had against you, and the crimes that we're going to lay out. This is my read between the lines. The crimes that we're going to lay out for the American people in our 2 reports to be given to Merrick Garland in the next couple of weeks. F you to Donald Trump. You want to come after me? Come after us. We stand behind our work as career civil servants. We're doing our job for justice. Now, what did Chutkan do? Chutkan helped him out by saying, the other reason I'm going to grant the motion for leave to dismiss the indictment without prejudice is that I don't see any indication that there was any harassment by the prosecutors of Donald Trump. No harassment without prejudice is fine by me. That's also going to help out if we ever see a Pam Bondi try to prosecute Jack Smith. Oh my God, there's a mismatch there. And I mean in favor of Jack Smith. Then at least we have a federal judge who oversees the prosecution and oversee the entirety of the criminal indictment process against Donald Trump, saying, I never saw anything untoward by the prosecutors, and certainly no harassment or anything like that. So I like the fact that that was in this decision as well. Now, Trump world, or that great, as I said in a recent hot take on Legal AF, the legal brain trust that is Eric Trump, who never went to law school. He jumped up and down in a recent posting on social media or an interview, and he said, there's other ramifications of this dismissal without prejudice, meaning it could be refiled in the future. It can't be refiled in the future. See, they're trying to cover up for the fact that the lawyers for Donald Trump sort of screwed this up because they didn't oppose the motion for leave to amend without prejudice. They should have said it should be with prejudice. We should never see this indictment again, and here's why, so that it's kind of preserved on appeal. But they didn't do that because they're not that good, despite the fact that they're going to have the number 1 or number 2 job in the Department of Justice when this whole thing is over. So Eric Trump jumped up and down and tried to cover for them and said, double jeopardy and statute of limitations. It's like, when you deal with them, it's like some sort of a misbegotten kitchen magnet poetry. It's just words that they heard somewhere or somebody wrote in their palm for them to say out loud. And then let me explain this to you. Okay. Neither of those concepts apply. There's no double jeopardy because there was no single jeopardy. Let me explain. In order for there to be jeopardy, what's called jeopardy attaching, to allow for double jeopardy. Because if you ask the average person on the street, what's double jeopardy? They'll be like, can't be prosecuted twice for the same crime. I mean, that's kind of, people sort of know that. Not exactly right. You can be prosecuted twice. You just can't have jeopardy attached twice. So let me interpret. Jeopardy attaches, especially in federal court, after a jury, not the grand jury, a jury, the petit jury, the one that makes the decisions about criminal liability or not, can, either guilt or innocence, that they're sworn in. Once that jury is in the box sworn in, jeopardy attaches. And after that, okay, if there's some sort of hung jury or mistrial or an attempt by another prosecutor somewhere to bring a similar or identical case, they won't be able to, because that would be double jeopardy, because that would be a second jeopardy. But there's no single jeopardy here, so there can't be double jeopardy. I think everybody here that follows us here on a live podcast like this knows and is frustrated by the fact that the case never went to trial. We've been in the indictment, motion to dismiss, immunity stage for a long, long time, for over 2 years, delayed by almost 9 months by the United States Supreme Court. We never picked a jury in the DC election interference case, never picked a jury in the Mar-a-Lago case. So there can't be double jeopardy. And the statute of limitations doesn't run either. Because it's, first of all, most statute of limitations for the crimes are over 10 years in federal court. And some of them don't even have a statute of limitations. And they are stayed. The clock stops like a giant snooze button, boom, for the period of time where there'd be temporary immunity for Donald Trump. So you just deduct the 4 years that he's president, and then the clock continues. So neither of those concepts help Donald Trump out in the least. The Mar-a-Lago case was also that one was on appeal, a little bit different procedural posture. That's the Espionage Act obstruction of an official, obstruction of justice claims against Donald Trump because he played, hide the documents, top secret classified documents from the United States of America, other people, and federal judges. And that went up on appeal by the Department of Justice because Eileen Cannon, federal judge appointed by Trump, decided for the first time in 250 years that she was going to dismiss an indictment, finding that the special counsel is invalid because it was improperly appointed, it wasn't confirmed by the Senate, it wasn't funded properly by Congress. Side note, there's talk of making Matt Gaetz, remember him? A special counsel to go after Jack Smith. Okay, now we're in the upside down world. And the argument is he doesn't need Senate confirmation because that's what Joe Biden's position was. But that's not the position of the lawyers that are in the room for Donald Trump in these various cases. I think he's going to be hard pressed to take the opposite position and appoint, without Senate confirmation, a special counsel. Let me go back to Mar-a-Lago. Case went up on appeal to the 11th Circuit. Everyone in my line of work sort of came to the same conclusion. If the 11th Circuit ever got around to it, they were going to reverse Judge Aileen Cannon, find that she had made a, how do we put this, reversible error, faux pas, and for her third time in the case, and reverse her decision and send it back. Maybe not to Aileen Cannon, especially now that she's being touted for attorney. She was being touted for attorney general at one point, but at some point. And so we have that. But we thought maybe we're not going to get the chance now because we knew that Jack Smith was going to dismiss the indictment, but he's going to make it hard on Donald Trump. He's going to dismiss or the appeal. He's going to dismiss the appeal, Jack Smith, the Mar-a-Lago appeal. That's at the 11th Circuit, but not for everybody. So Carlos de Oliveira, the maintenance worker, have a seat. Okay. Walt Nauta, the valet butler, you too, have a seat. You're not going anywhere. Now, a lot of people in our chat, I'm sure, are ready to start typing, Trump will just give him a pardon. He may. But Jack Smith's going to make him work for it. And he's going to make him expend political capital to pardon these people. And then others can bring that up about MAGA and about the Republicans. In other words, he's not going to make it just go in the dark, in the quiet, where nobody sees or hears it. He's going to make Donald Trump, on a record of conviction, hopefully, pardon these people. And the threat of a pardon is not going to be enough. So I see the 11th Circuit going forward with this issue. Plus, they want to have a case to reverse her decision because it needs to be erased from the books. And in order to do that, they got to take it up on appeal. So they're right to do it. Keep the case alive against the co-conspirators who don't have presidential immunity, haven't been elected anything, and try to reverse her decision at the 11th Circuit. So it's not the law of the land that other MAGA like Trump can point to in the future. And so that's what's going to happen at Mar-a-Lago. And we'll see what happens with Donald Trump and all of his parts. That's the very reason people are pushing so hard for the Jan 6th defendants to all be sentenced and tried, regardless of the fact that they think they're getting the golden pardon by these DC federal judges. Because if Donald Trump's going to pardon them, the public should know the crimes that they were charged with or convicted of. Again, exacting political capital and making it more painful on the exercise of the pardon. Don't make it easy on them. We'll skip the trial because this is what one federal judge said, Judge Contreras. We'll just skip the trial. It's a waste of judicial resources. He's getting a pardon anyway. Like, can you do your job until you're told not to do your job? That's sort of my approach. And so that's where we are with everything related to Jack Smith. Lastly, let me touch on the reports. They're important. They're going to be heartbreaking because they are going to lay out clearly the crimes that were committed and the evidence about them in a couple of hundred pages apiece, Mar-a-Lago and DC election interference case. And the heartbreak part is going to be that Merrick Garland waited 19 months. It's crazy the amount of time. 19 months to appoint a special counsel to go after it. And the special counsel was, just to remind people, Jack Smith wasn't even picking up the pieces from an ongoing investigation. It was starting an investigation. So I should have been talking about all of these things like a year ago last summer, not now, when we ran out of time. And that's a problem. And that's something that Merrick Garland's going to have to live with. Look, the reality is the skills that go into being a federal judge, which he was, or a potential Supreme Court justice, that kind of erudite, owly, let me stroke my beard on that one. That doesn't work when you're up against a Donald Trump and you're supposed to be the Attorney General. You can't be feckless. You got to be aggressive and robust. And you can say a lot of things about Merrick Garland, but robust and muscular and energetic are not one of them. He did a lot of other things. I'm not saying it wasn't, but he went after the Jan 6th lower level people. Hunter Biden got 3 convictions. Okay. Menendez, the senator from New Jersey. But like Trump, what about Trump? If he just started all that earlier, we wouldn't have been in this mess, but he didn't. And that helped. That and another major decision he made, let's be frank. He appointed, because he wanted to be bipartisan, he appointed Robert Hur, a Republican, to be Joe Biden's special counsel. And then we got to sift through a 345-page report by Robert Hur, which basically called Joe Biden at the worst possible moment possible, a doddering old fool who wouldn't be prosecuted because he's too old and feeble to be prosecuted, and the jury would have sympathy for him. He actually wrote that. How did that help us? So Merrick Garland is going to, the history books are not going to be kind to what he did and what he did to the rule of law and democracy, even though he's a very kind man and a decent man, but that's not the man or the person that we needed at that moment in time against somebody like Donald Trump. Welcome back. Thanks for supporting the show. Legal AF, the YouTube channel. Hit the free subscribe button. And of course, on all things Midas Touch, we're doing the channel in collaboration with Midas. My work is there, as well as is the Legal AF full-length podcast on Wednesdays and Saturdays on the Midas Touch Network. In the meantime, I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.